No one expected what was about to happen when Jasmine Crockett tried to humiliate Karoline Leavitt on live TV. But she had no idea what was coming next. The setting: a high-stakes, nationally televised political panel. The studio glows, with tension, bright lights, hot mics, and millions watching at home. At center stage, Karoline Leavitt, the sharp, composed, conservative commentator with a reputation on the line and a truth she refuses to keep quiet. Jasmine Crockett, the fiery congresswoman known for her blistering comebacks and fierce defense of Vice President Kamala Harris. The debate? A clash over leaked documents, political accountability, and a vice president's alleged hidden scandals. The red live light above the cameras flickered on. The air inside the packed TV studio was thick with anticipation. Audience members leaned forward in their seats. Social media chat feeds on the massive screens behind the panelists exploded with hashtags. Crockett vs. Leavitt, Kamala leaks, what is she hiding at? The sleek modern desk sat Karoline Leavitt, poised in a navy blazer, her expression cool and focused. Across from her, Jasmine Crockett sat with a smirk on her lips and fire in her eyes, tapping her pen like a warning drumbeat. The moderator barely got the first sentence out before Jasmine struck. Before we even get into whatever fantasy Ms. Leavitt wants to spin tonight, Jasmine began with a laugh that oozed sarcasm. Let's just remember who we're dealing with, a former Trump staffer trying to lecture the rest of us on ethics. That's rich. Laughter rippled through parts of the crowd, but Karoline didn't flinch. Jasmine leaned forward. Karoline, do you even understand how politics works? Or are you just repeating what some podcast told you this morning? She waved her hand dismissively, eyes flicking toward the camera like she was already imagining the viral TikToks. You're out here making these wild accusations about Vice President Harris based on unverified documents? Where's your credibility, sweetheart? The word sweetheart landed like a slap across the table. Twitter exploded. Did she just call her sweetheart on live TV? Jasmine trying to big sister her into silence, not cool. Karoline better hit back, but Karoline didn't flinch. She slowly turned toward Jasmine, folded her hands, and replied, calm as ever. Congresswoman, with all due respect, condescension isn't a counterpoint. The studio quieted. And I may be young, but I do understand how politics works. I understand it well enough to know when someone is hiding behind identity and rhetoric instead of answering real questions. The crowd murmured. Even the moderator raised his eyebrows. Karoline glanced at her notes, then looked up with laser focus. You want to talk about facts? Let's talk about the official travel records that mysteriously disappeared. The campaign donations funneled through PACs that trace back to shell companies in Oakland. Let's talk about the internal memo where VP Harris's staff warned her not to meet with a certain foreign donor. And then she did it anyway. Jasmine's smile began to strain. Those documents have not been authenticated. Karoline, cut in, still calm. Then why did the White House remove the staffer listed in the memo just days after the leak? Gasps, some claps. The audience was shifting. Karoline's voice remained measured, but there was steel underneath. This isn't about partisanship. It's about transparency. If this were any other vice president, man or woman, you would be demanding answers too. A moment passed. Jasmine narrowed her eyes. You're not trying to inform the public. You're trying to smear a black woman in power. Don't pretend this is anything else. A heavy silence fell. Karoline's jaw tensed, but she didn't let emotion take over. I admire what Kamala Harris represents. I really do. But representation without accountability is just decoration. That line landed like a grenade. Online, the internet lit up. Representation without accountability is just decoration. This is going to be on t-shirts by morning. Leavitt just flipped the whole debate. The moderator tried to move the discussion forward, but the momentum had shifted. Karoline had held her ground, delivered facts, and dismantled Jasmine's attacks without raising her voice. The lights inside the studio seemed to intensify, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. The moderator looked uneasy, glancing from Karoline to Jasmine as the commercial break countdown hit 0, 2, 1. The red live light flashed again, and Jasmine Crockett came back swinging. "You know what's really cute, Karoline?" she said, her voice dripping with theatrical pity. "You walk in here, reciting documents and dragging our first black woman vice president like you've uncovered Watergate. But let's get real. This is a young white woman who's never held elected office, never been on the front lines, and suddenly thinks she's the nation's moral compass." The crowd reacted instantly, some with gasps, others with cautious murmurs. Karoline didn't blink. "You speak with the arrogance of someone who's only ever talked about the struggle, never lived it," Jasmine continued, pointing a sharp finger across the table. "Do you know what it's like to face voter suppression? Systemic bias? Do you know what it's like to be judged before you even speak?" Her voice began to rise, almost theatrical now, as she fed off the energy of the studio lights and cameras. "You've made a career off right-wing outrage, but you don't get the stakes. Kamala Harris shattered glass ceilings you didn't even know existed. You don't challenge a legacy like that. You respect it." Some audience members started clapping. Others looked visibly uncomfortable. Karoline let the moment settle. She could feel the trap Jasmine was laying, bait her into looking defensive, emotional, or worse, dismissive of identity. But instead of rebutting with rage, Karoline slowly reached down, pulled a folded paper from her briefcase and placed it on the desk. Then she looked Jasmine squarely in the eye. "You want to talk about respect?" she said quietly. "Let's talk about what Kamala Harris has done with that shattered ceiling." The crowd went silent. "I was raised by a single mom who worked 3 jobs. I went to college with a scholarship and carried 2 jobs the whole time. So no, I don't come from privilege, but I come from accountability." The studio sat in frozen silence. "Here's an email," Karoline continued, lifting the paper, "between one of Harris's senior staffers and a lobbyist connected to a tech company currently under investigation for data surveillance. The date? 1 week before Harris publicly praised that same company for its inclusive hiring practices." Jasmine tried to cut in, but Karoline raised her voice, not yelling, but commanding. "Let's be clear. This isn't about race. It's not about gender. It's about power, and how some people, no matter their background, think they're above scrutiny once they reach it." The moderator leaned forward. "Ms. Leavitt, are you suggesting the vice president accepted influence from—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Karoline interrupted calmly. "I'm showing you. The paper trail exists. The whistleblowers exist. And Jasmine knows it." Whispers spread across the crowd like wildfire. Jasmine's face hardened, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. She flipped through her own notes, then shot back. "You think some random email proves corruption? Anyone can print a PDF and slap a date on it. This is pure desperation, Karoline." Karoline raised a brow. "Desperation looks a lot like attacking someone's identity when you're out of arguments." Another wave of gasps. A few audience members clapped, quiet, cautious, but real. "And let's not pretend Kamala Harris is beyond criticism," Karoline continued, leaning in now. "She locked up more black men in California than almost any AG before her. She withheld evidence that could have freed innocent inmates. Where was your outrage then?" Jasmine opened her mouth, then stopped. The crowd was watching her now. Online, the storm had begun. Karoline just flipped the script. "Wait, did she just mention the withheld evidence case? That's real." Crockett, looking shook. She underestimated her. The camera zoomed in on Jasmine's face. She was clearly trying to recalibrate, searching for a line that could recover the narrative. But Karoline didn't stop. "You say I don't understand the stakes. I do. I just don't think identity should be a shield for misconduct." That line hit like a freight train. Even the moderator exhaled slowly. Jasmine tried one last time, her voice rising, a clear crack in her composure. "This is exactly what the far right wants, women tearing each other down. You're playing into their hands." Karoline didn't even blink. "No, I'm doing what every woman in power should do, telling the truth even when it's inconvenient." Audience reaction. A pause. and then the first loud applause of the night. Jasmine's jaw tightened. She could feel the control slipping through her fingers. And the audience, they felt it too. Small clusters started clapping again. People in the back row stood. The whispers had become voices. The energy had turned. The moment Jasmine Crockett believed she had Karoline Leavitt trapped would become the moment everything turned upside down. The debate stage had grown hotter, emotionally and literally. The crowd's energy was volatile, like a thunderstorm waiting to explode. Even the moderator, who had struggled to stay neutral, seemed more like a spectator at a heavyweight boxing match than a debate referee. Jasmine, her voice cool again, leaned forward like a chess master preparing the final move. "All right, Karoline. You want to talk policy? Let's talk policy." Karoline tilted her head calm. "I've been talking policy all night." Jasmine smirked. "No, you've been throwing accusations. But let's see if you actually know what you're talking about." She snapped her fingers, and one of her aides handed her a thick folder labeled Fiscal Projections, Harris Infrastructure Budget Plan, Internal Draft. The audience tensed. "This," Jasmine declared, holding it high, "is an unreleased draft of Vice President Harris's infrastructure initiative, a 400-page policy outline with advanced tax modeling and environmental projections. If you're such a brilliant policy mind, go ahead. Explain how you'd pay for the clean transit. Provisions listed on page 312, section 4. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The moderator looked stunned. "You're giving her an unreleased policy paper?" he asked. "It's a draft that's been circulating in closed circles," Jasmine said smugly. "Nothing classified. If she's done her homework, she should be fine." Karoline didn't flinch. She accepted the folder without hesitation, flipping it open with steady fingers. Her eyes scanned the page, her brow furrowed for a brief moment. Jasmine sat back, smiling like a cat watching a mouse panic in a maze. The clock ticked. 30 seconds passed. 60. The audience was dead silent, leaning forward, holding their breath, and then Karoline looked up. "You're trying to trap me with Section 4? Jasmine crossed her arms. "It's a legitimate question." Karoline closed the folder. "No, it's a test. One you thought I'd fail. But here's the problem, Jasmine. You didn't read it carefully enough." Murmurs surged through the crowd. Karoline held up the folder like evidence in court. Page 312, section 4, Clean Transit Implementation. Yes, it looks impressive on paper, but it's based on an outdated 2022 emissions baseline that was debunked by both the Brookings Institution and MIT's climate modeling team in 2023. She turned to the audience now, eyes sharp, voice steady. In other words, this section overstates expected carbon offsets by 17.4%, while underestimating the cost of electrical grid upgrades by $8.2 billion. Gasps. The moderator blinked. Jasmine sat still, but her jaw flexed. Karoline wasn't finished. Not only that, but the financial offset this plan relies on? She flipped the folder open again. A proposed carbon tax on commercial freight. That tax was already rejected in committee last quarter due to bipartisan opposition. She looked up at Jasmine. "So either you're presenting a dead-on-arrival policy to make me look unprepared, or you didn't do your own homework." Boom. Beat of silence, and then the room exploded. "Oh, she just destroyed that trap." Jasmine tried to play economist and fumbled hard. Karoline citing Brookings and MIT off the cuff like that, insane. Even the moderator looked like he was barely containing a grin. "Ms. Crockett, would you like to respond?" he asked carefully. Jasmine forced a laugh, waving dismissively. "Oh, please. So now she's a policy analyst too?" Karoline didn't even turn to face her. She kept speaking to the audience now. "No, I'm just someone who reads past the headlines. You should try it." The jab landed clean. Applause broke out again, this time louder, less restrained. Jasmine leaned in, clearly rattled. "You think you scored some big point? Real governing isn't about pop quizzes and sound bites." Karoline's eyes narrowed. "You're right. Real governing is about accountability, which is why Kamala Harris's Clean Transit Plan, as written in this draft, is both financially unstable and politically unviable. And yet it's being pitched to voters like it's ready to roll out next year. She paused, letting that sting. That's not leadership. That's misleading the public. More audience reaction. That was the most surgical takedown I've seen in a political debate. Karoline didn't just answer the question. She revealed the trap and broke it. Crockett is freezing up. Jasmine, now visibly frustrated, shot back. You want to critique drafts? Fine. Let's talk about your proposals. Do you even have any? Or are you just here to rip apart real ideas from the sidelines? Karoline stepped forward. No notes now, no folder. Just her voice. My proposal is simple. Tell the truth. Stop selling dreams built on bad math. Stop using your identity as a shield while hiding behind bureaucratic bloat. And stop assuming people like me won't show up prepared. The room went silent again. Then a single clap. Then two. Then a wave of applause that filled the studio. Even the camera crew, usually invisible, could be seen nodding, and just when everyone thought it was over, Karoline dropped a final bombshell. Oh, and one more thing. This draft? It wasn't leaked. It was emailed directly to me by a former Harris policy advisor, anonymously. The crowd collectively gasped. Why? She continued. Because even they don't believe in the direction this administration is heading. Mic. Drop. Jasmine's face went pale. And the internet was on fire. Wait, Leavitt had insider sources. That twist at the end. Wild. Crockett. Walking into every trap she tried to lay, Jasmine Crockett had walked into her own trap. But what came next would be the unraveling of everything she had tried to protect. The studio was no longer neutral ground. The energy had shifted, and everyone could feel it. From the production crew to the interns standing just off stage, whispers began spreading, like wildfire. Jasmine Crockett, once so composed and confident, was now fidgeting, her blazer slightly disheveled, her voice a few octaves higher than before. Let's get one thing straight, she snapped, grabbing the mic like it was her last shield. None of this means anything. Drafts change, staffers talk, politics is messy, it always has been. Karoline didn't move. She just watched, measured, poised. Jasmine kept going, her tone rising with every word. You think you've proved something because you got handed an internal draft? That doesn't make you an expert. It makes you a glorified mailman. Ouch. A few audience members grimaced. The personal jab didn't land, it reeked of desperation. Karoline raised a brow. Is that really your takeaway? That the facts I laid out don't matter? Because they arrived in an envelope? Murmurs of she's losing it and not a good look rippled through the crowd. The moderator intervened, sensing the storm. Ms. Crockett, would you like to respond directly to the policy contradictions Ms. Leavitt raised? Jasmine exhaled sharply. No, because we're not here to debate drafts. We're here to talk about the real world, not the hypotheticals that some 24-year-old intern scribbled together. Karoline stepped forward. Respectfully, Jasmine, you introduced that draft. You brought it on stage, you tried to use it to expose me, and now that it didn't go your way, you're pretending it's irrelevant. Her voice sharpened, not louder but firmer, every word landing with weight. You can't just cherry-pick when evidence matters. That's not leadership. That's damage control. A wave of nods spread across the crowd. A few people even started clapping, hesitant at first, then stronger. Jasmine's face tightened. She glanced toward her team off stage, then back at the audience. Fine. You want transparency? Let's talk about your side then. Your party's refusal to support affordable housing initiatives. Your donors, yes, I said it. Your donors, who profit off deregulation and laugh at climate deadlines. She was reaching, grasping for anything that would shift the conversation away from the vice grip Karoline had locked her into. Karoline didn't flinch. I'm happy to talk about housing policy. In fact, I proposed a plan that would allocate land use incentives to increase affordable housing without wrecking local economies. But unlike you, I won't stand here and scream about my opponent's donors while ignoring the consequences of my own policies. She turned fully to the audience now. You've seen the game. Loud voices, personal attacks, and finger-pointing, meant to distract you from the truth. She let the silence hang. But the truth is simple. We deserve leaders who show up prepared, who respect facts, who don't collapse when challenged. Another burst of applause. Louder this time. Even the camera operators tilted in to catch audience reactions. Faces lit with shock, recognition, support. Jasmine was now visibly rattled. You're trying to play innocent? She snapped. Please, we all know your playbook. Act calm. Quote a few reports and pretend that makes you the voice of reason. Karoline smiled faintly. No, I don't pretend to be the voice of reason. I just refuse to be the voice of chaos. Boom. The studio erupted. She ate that. UP. Crockett fell apart in real time. Leavitt calm. Crockett cooked. Someone checked Jasmine's blood pressure for... Jasmine's facade had shattered. Her next words came out jumbled. This whole setup was staged. That folder? Probably fake. A stunt. A viral moment. This isn't even real policy. But she'd already lost them. The moderator leaned in gently. Ms. Crockett, would you like to withdraw the document you introduced earlier? Or stand by its contents? Jasmine froze. Karoline stepped in with laser precision. You don't get to dismiss a policy document you brought into this debate just because it didn't play out the way you planned. That's not just weak, that's dishonest. Then came the kicker. And, if this is how you respond when challenged by me, what happens when you're challenged by world leaders, economists, or foreign powers who don't care about your Twitter comebacks? The audience was on their feet. Standing ovation. Phones were out. Clips were being recorded. Screenshots of Jasmine's bewildered expression were already circulating online with captions like, "When your own trap backfires." Plot twist. The intern knew more than the boss. Crockett shaking, Leavitt standing. Jasmine tried one last pivot, voice trembling now. Okay, so let's say Kamala made a few mistakes. That doesn't erase decades of progress we've made. You can't just stand there and tear it all down with one soundbite. Karoline stepped closer. No one is trying to tear down progress. We're trying to stop the lies that claim it's happening when it's not. There's nothing progressive about misleading the people you swore to serve. Stunned silence. If the foundation is cracked, we fix it. We don't paint over it and hope the building doesn't collapse. Audience reaction. Is this even a debate anymore or just a movie? Karoline is delivering bars. That fix the foundation line gonna be everywhere tomorrow. Karoline turned to the audience for one final moment. Eyes locked, her voice even unwavering. You deserve better than empty slogans and panic defenses. You deserve leaders who speak with clarity, act with purpose, and answer with facts. She paused. And if you think we should hold every voice in power, no matter what party, to that standard, then you already know who's been honest tonight. Audience rose again, louder than before. The standing ovation wasn't just polite, it was passionate. And Jasmine? She sat down, silently. No retort. No comeback. A camera caught her slowly pulling off her microphone, looking away from the crowd. Jasmine Crockett thought she could claw her way back into control, but Karoline Leavitt had saved her final strike for last, and it would bury the entire facade for good. The air in the studio was thick with tension and awe. Cameras panned across the stunned audience. Every seat was filled, and yet the silence was deafening. Jasmine sat stiffly, hands clenched in her lap. The color had drained slightly from her face, but the fire in her eyes hadn't gone out completely. Not yet. She leaned forward, grasping at her final card. You know what? None of this matters. Karoline tilted her head. Excuse me? Jasmine stood up. Her voice quivered, not from fear, but from something far more dangerous, desperation. This whole thing, this debate, it's theater. You come here with your prepped lines and your cherry-picked documents and your gotcha quotes, and suddenly you think that makes you better? Please. She gestured toward the crowd. This isn't leadership, it's a circus, and I refuse to let my entire record get reduced to one flashy takedown. Some in the audience murmured, but there was no applause this time. The attempt to flip the table fell flat. Jasmine was trying to reframe the whole battle as beneath her, but no one was buying it anymore. She kept going. You all think she won because she memorized a few lines and raised her voice at the right time? This is real life, not a TikTok reel. Karoline didn't even blink. You're right about one thing, Jasmine, she said calmly. This is real life. She slowly stepped forward, her heels clicking like a gavel echoing in a courtroom. But in real life, people can't afford to be lied to. She paused, scanning the room. Every eye locked on her. In real life, single mothers are choosing between insulin and rent. Veterans are sitting on wait lists for surgeries they needed last year. Students are drowning in debt for degrees they were told would change their lives, and they're still serving coffee. The crowd leaned in. In real life, the people who trusted you, trusted Kamala Harris and the policies you defend, those people are hurting, and instead of taking responsibility, you mock them. You mock me. You mock the truth. Jasmine opened her mouth, but Karoline raised a hand and silenced the room. You said this was all for views, that it was a circus. So let me ask you this. Was it a circus when the emails you sent to lobbyists contradicted the promises you made to your constituents? A hush fell. Was it a circus when a memo from the vice president's office, the one you said didn't exist, was leaked to every major outlet this morning? Gasps. Jasmine blinked, hard. Her throat moved, but no sound came out. Because I've got it right here. Karoline pulled it from her folder. A crisp printout, time-stamped and signed. In Kamala Harris's own words, delay support for key energy reform until after midterm optics stabilize. She held the paper up for the camera. You asked if I brought receipts. I brought the whole ledger. Boom. The crowd exploded. No way, she brought the memo. Jasmine's career just flatlined on air. Karoline just torched the whole administration with a single sentence. Somebody play. The funeral music. Jasmine stumbled. That memo was never supposed to. That's classified. Karoline smiled gently. Then maybe someone should have thought twice before forwarding it to 6 staffers and copying a pacey strategist. The audience gasped again. Jasmine's face went pale. This is illegal. You can't just show that. Karoline didn't flinch. Actually, under the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act, I can. Especially when the contents concern the willful obstruction of federal transparency mandates. She turned to the moderator, then to the audience. You can try to distract people with insults. You can yell. You can deflect. But facts don't flinch. Then she looked Jasmine straight in the eyes, and neither do I. Silence. Then, erupting applause. The room shook. People were on their feet. Cameramen stopped recording just to clap. Crew members high-fived in the wings. Jasmine? She sat back down, stunned, small, shaken, swallowed by the very stage she once dominated. The moderator could barely speak over the roar of the crowd. Ms. Leavitt, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Karoline didn't even turn toward him. Her eyes were still locked on Jasmine. Only this. America deserves better. And it starts by holding the powerful accountable, no matter how high their office sits. Another wave of applause rolled through. She didn't just end the debate, she ended the era. That memo changes everything. Karoline. Leavitt just built her legacy on Jasmine's collapse. If Leavitt runs for president one day, this is the clip they'll play. The camera slowly zoomed in as Karoline turned back to the audience. Calm, composed, victorious. The dust had settled. The studio light still burned overhead, but the fire in Jasmine Crockett's eyes had flickered out. And as the cheers faded, one thing became crystal clear. This was no longer her stage. Jasmine sat motionless. No more comebacks, no last-minute deflections. The memo, the receipts, The avalanche of truth Karoline Leavitt had unleashed had left her cornered in a storm of her own making. For a brief moment she stood. She looked toward the moderator, then the crowd as if searching for an exit or an excuse. None came. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I thought I could handle this. I thought politics was about power, about survival. But I guess I forgot about truth. Then she quietly stepped off the stage. No applause, no escort, just silence. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked straight into the camera, into the hearts of every viewer watching at home. Sometimes the loudest person in the room isn't the strongest. Sometimes it's the one who listens, waits, and then speaks truth, clearly and without fear. She stepped forward, her words steady and resolute. I didn't come here to win a debate. I came here because the American people deserve answers. And because for too long those in power have counted on our silence. A beat. But we're not silent anymore. She turned toward the audience, their faces still lit with awe. When arrogance tries to dress itself up as leadership, when manipulation disguises itself as passion, when lies parade around as policy, we must stand up, because in the end, intelligence, merit, and truth always rise above arrogance and manipulation. Applause rippled through the room again. But this time, it was quieter. Not because it was any less powerful, but because the message had settled deeper. It wasn't about clapping anymore. It was about thinking. Karoline looked back at the moderator. This isn't just about Jasmine Crockett, or even Kamala Harris. This is about a system that counts on us being too distracted to ask questions, too overwhelmed to demand better, too tired to fight. Then straight into the camera one last time. But I see you. The mother working double shifts just to put food on the table. The student buried in debt but still dreaming big. The veteran who gave everything and just wants to be seen. You are why I fight, she paused. Not because it's easy, but because someone has to. A hush fell over the audience. Even the tech crew looked frozen behind their panels. Karoline stepped back, and then delivered her final question. One that echoed long after the broadcast ended. Do you believe justice was served? Or are you still waiting for someone to finally speak for you? Her voice softened. If you believe truth should always rise, share this message. And don't just watch from the sidelines. Stand up, speak out. Because the future doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the clearest one. Fade to black. Text on screen. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be heard. Stand with truth. Hold them accountable as drama unfolds.